All right, thank you for staying with us. Now we are back to look at inflation figures and a breakdown for the month of February 2025. Things are still looking pretty good in the country, as the National Bureau of Statistics says headline inflation rate is to 23.18%. That's November, we had 34.60%, and December, we're at 34.80%. That's after the rebased CPI, that's for the Consumer Price Index that was done by the NBS, and we got down to 24.48% for the month of January. And yes, you get it right. Inflation figures are still coming down. But before we look at this again, let's see what happened. Beginning from, well, let's move very quickly and see where we are in February. 23.18% is where we found ourselves. That's from what we had in November and December, and now we are at this point. And the November surge and all of that, we'll fast track to January 2025 and see what played out. 24.48%. That's after the rebase, like I said earlier. And now we moved to 23.18%. That's the latest inflation rate for February 2025, which declined from 23.18% from 24.48%. From the report, on a month-on-month basis, the food inflation rate in February was 1.67%. That's what we have for month-on-month, 1.67%. And that's for food inflation year-on-year is 19.89%. Year-on-year urban inflation stood at 25.15%. And rural inflation, 19.89%. There was a decrease of 8.51% with regards to urban inflation in February 2024 compared to what we have now. On a year-on-year basis, rural inflation also stood at 19.89%, which was 10.09% lower when compared to 29.9% recorded in February 2024. Now, on a 12-month average, the urban inflation rate was 32.22%, and that's which was 4.28 percentage points higher than 27.93% in February 2024. Those are the breakdown of the figures that we had in February 2024. But let's talk to Dr. Emeka Okengwu, who is a project development and management expert. He joins me live from our Abuja studios. Dr. Okengwu, good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming on the program. I think my first question... Thank you very much. Yeah, to you would be, first, let's speak to the figures. We've seen a decline after the rebasing in January, which means, obviously, that there's a bit of decline. And people can attest to the fact that even price of foodstuff, in some cases, rice, yam, are beginning to reduce. So how does that come to you, and what's your understanding of this new figure from the NBS?
Well, it's good news to a very large extent, but you also gave a small kicker. We didn't just climb down from the 38% we were to the 23% we are now. You know, there was a CPI program, as it were. But having said that, most evaluations globally are showing that Nigeria is showing a lot of resilience, and that we're actually and truly bouncing back. But there is a but for me. It's good to bounce back. It's not very good to have your real inflation at 25%. It's not good to have, you know, your urban inflation at 19%. It's not good to have anything in that light that has to do with development at anything not in single-digit figures. And it also has to be inclusive. And this is where I think the challenge and the issues are. Kudos to governments that are doing very well. Kudos to the CBN that are doing quite well too. At least if there's anything that we can be proud of, we are beginning to get some kind of exchange rate stability where you're able to predict, you know, to some degree of reliability, you know, what the exchange rate will be within a given period. The white swing is no longer there. So it's all work in progress, I guess. It's all good for us as a country, but I think more needs to be done. And the more that needs to be done is that if you look at what it is we're discussing now, you're basically focusing on the formal sector. And every time I come on your show, I keep saying to you, I am a little worried about what is going on in the informal and the real sector. And this is where that inclusivity, must be ramped in, must be aggregated, must be supported. That would be my opening.
When we have reforms like this one taken by President Bola Tinubu, that's, liberalizing the foreign exchange market and taking away subsidy and all, many will say there are supposed to be some sort of interventions. Now, what specific interventions are you looking at moving forward, considering what's been done already before now to some targeted segments of the Nigeria's economy?
Well, for me, I think the first intervention would be for us to have a proper data of where we're intervening and who we're intervening against. It's very, very important. And this is where the single register now comes to focus, or the social register as it were. And for me, I also think that we shouldn't be focusing on just a ministry to be able to handle this. These things should be sector-wide. Whatever interventions that needs to, be put into place has to be across board. Intervene in the energy sector, intervene in the infrastructure sector, anything that can be able to support social services. There has to be some social program, to be able to hedge, these very big headwinds that everybody is experiencing. More so, if you look at, let me give you a typical example. I mean, you have a minimum wage of 70,000 approved by government. The first question will be, are people actually earning it? Is that the minimum wage of even public sector, workers? Have government started paying? If the answer is yes, then good news. And then the second question will be, against that 70,000 that, is being paid as minimum wage, does it translate to living wage? Is it able to also now deal, with the basics, transportation, health, education, et al., that person who's earning that money? And above all, food. Yes, food is coming down. The price of food is coming down. Food inflation is coming down. It's very, very good. Is it right now affordable, and would it be sustainable? And the sustainability angle to it is where we might be requiring some time. When the World Bank or somebody had said we'll be needing a minimum of 15 years, to climb out of this, a lot of people, didn't see the deeper meaning to it. It's very easy to destroy. Very, very easy to destroy, but quite difficult to rebuild. So this rebuilding process is not going to be a walk in the park. But like you asked me directly, in what areas would we be intervening? I think we should focus more on food and more food. The moment we are able to rein in food security, the moment we're able to make food production sustainable and affordable and sustainable, and then make whatever it is that you earn be able to feed you, then we are on the right path to full and total inclusivity. The second will be energy. If we're able to also now start creating alternative energy sources that can be able to make energy affordable, because it's one thing for you to be able to ramp up, your foodstuffs. Another thing is for you to be able to, hold them for a longer period of time. In this instance, for some foods that are perishable, you might be needing refrigeration, and that will be requiring energy. Again, after that will be transportation for me. For you to be able to move from one location to the other. But thankfully, the CNG is actually helping. I mean, a lot of people are buying into it. And then third will be health. So in this order, there is no area you can actually say this is where we should start as a primary, focus. But for me, like I keep telling you, it will be food and more food for me. If we're able to get food sufficient, if we're able to make food available, if we're able to make it cheap, and affordable, then I think we might be able to now have the energy to start working the rest of the walk uphill.
The role of small businesses around the economy is something that is also very important. Yes, we've seen some moves by SMEDAN and some other government agencies in trying to address some of the challenges faced by small businesses, but they remain the engine room of every economy as they create a lot of jobs. What sort of support are you also expecting, maybe from the likes of the Bank of Industry, the likes of the Central Bank? Because the small businesses will definitely tell you that if they can grow, they would employ more. And if they can do that, unemployment rate would be addressed and reduced. So how does that also come to you, the role of small businesses in economic development and building an inclusive economy?
Well, small businesses, like you said, are fundamental. They're foundational. And there are three dimensions if you make to small businesses. One will be those that are providing services. Two will be those that are at the back end, maybe aggregating raw materials that can now turn into, the bulk that are being used in production. Okay? Three might now be those, who are in the supply, chain of those services. So if you are able to, again, create a compendium of these people, you are able to now properly support them. But in trying to now support these small businesses, remember that the bigger players now also come into the mix. Let me give you a typical example with probably people who sell foodstuffs. Now, for you to be able to sell foodstuffs, there has to be farm gate, outputs. Okay, if you're selling perishables. For you to be able to now sell the processed ones, there also has to be big players that are also now, producing in large quantities. So this is where there's intricate relationship between the small businesses, the mid people, and then the big players. And this is where you now have what you call the bourgeoisie and the comprador bourgeoisie. Now, the bourgeoisie are the manufacturers. The comprador bourgeoisie are now those middle people, okay, who now begin to now service the small business, administrators or the small business holdings. Now, it is not about funding only. It is also about knowing their back-end needs. I've just mentioned to you that energy is very critical. Even if you gave somebody all the whole money he needed, and then he was going to be spending it only on, buying fuels, then he won't be able to return on that investment. So us creating energy will be very, very critical for these small businesses. Again, the source of raw materials will also be very, very key. So it's one thing for you to give somebody money, and it's another thing for the person to be able to buy and make profit on what they're buying. So there has to be some stability in the supply chain vis-a-vis price, okay, and then sales. In some instances, you go to the market and then you buy something for 10 naira. By the time you go back the next day, the prices have shifted. So that guy who is now sold at the old price might not be able to restock his goods. These are all the issues. So there has to be some stability in the midstream and then some stability in the raw material supply process for you to be able to have, small businesses that are running well. Again, taxes. I am just excited and happy that the House of Reps, I think, have passed this tax bill that's consolidating, all the taxes into one single, lane. Hitherto, you have so many taxes that are crippling, small businesses, and you find out that by the end of the day, from your rentals to tax A to tax Z, we make your business practically, you can't be able to run it. So what's important is that I think we should be able to create a proper framework. And in doing so, here comes again the challenge of being able to create a compendium of these businesses. We must also have a register for these businesses, their capacities, their capabilities, their locations, their needs, before you can even start talking about supporting them with funds.
Now, we are expecting the big one. That's the rebased GDP. And that's the big one, considering all of the sectors that will be factored in at this very time, sectors that were not considered before now. And we expect that Nigeria might become a bigger, larger economy across the African continent. That's where we used to be, but our currency issues and the dollar, the depreciation of the naira, we've seen ourselves fall to, I think, number 4 at the moment. Now, if that happens, what prospects do you see for Africa's most populous nation, that's Nigeria?
Like I said, there has to be synergy. What you now have is that a lot of the figures that we're rolling out now are around the things that happen in the formal sector. That point must be noted. Okay, we have not been able to do a lot of ramping in of our informal and real sector. And unfortunately, that's where every resource that you can use in becoming this very big economy that all of us dream to be are. And what's driving our formal economy, unfortunately, are more of services, okay, are more of these comprador bourgeoisies that I mentioned earlier, than you have the real bourgeoisies are in the manufacturing and production. Okay, now, for that to happen, there are some elements, that critical elements you must be able to ramp up that you must bring together onto that table, starting from your research institutes, okay, and to your land aggregation, to your seeds aggregation if you're talking about agriculture, to your technologies that are locally, produced, to so many factors, so that it's just not a wish. It's something that you need to be deliberate and measured about. Okay, so in rebasing and us becoming bigger than we are now does not solve the problem of inclusivity totally, and that's important you know it. What will solve the problem or challenge of inclusivity is that you have, I don't know how many, out of 200 million Nigerians, how many of us are banked? You have less than 30% of the country. I'll be shocked if you even have gotten to that point now, in the tax nets. This is a fact. So you need to be able to not only spread your tax net, you don't spread it and ask people to start paying tax, considering that we also have a pay-as-you-earn system presently running in Nigeria. You get people to pay tax by being able to support what it is they do, but you cannot support what they do if you don't know what they do. So the first thing will be for you to be able to create that database, okay, do scoping studies, do technical audits, do ABCD, and then be able to now start building and bridging this gap between your rail sector, okay, which is where you have a lot of your informal activities, and then your formal sector, which is where you have your big players right now. And one sector that will be able to help us do this very easily, or two sectors, will be first, the agricultural sector, and second, the mining sector. And then third, of course, at the hem of the mining sector will be the metallurgy, where you have the steel and metal sector. The moment you do this aggregation, then you're formed what we can call an anchor economy. For instance, this is us living in Abuja here. I dare to ask, how many industries do you have supporting the burgeoning population of Abuja? I'll be damned if we have up to, 2 or 3 industries in this part of in Abuja, the federal capital, that can take 1,000 workers at a time. I'll be very, very surprised if any such companies exist. And how many public servants do you have in Abuja? Probably at the maximum 20,000, 30,000, if you're even up to that. So the question will be, what are you doing with the remaining 4-point-something million, okay, that are neither here nor there? So there has to be a program, and Abuja also represents what's happening in the other parts of the country.
Well, a lot of work to be done. But in 1 minute, I will just let us allow. What's the outlook, considering at least a bit of bounce back that we've seen surrounding the economy? What is your outlook, Dr. Okengwu?
Very, very, very positive. Very, 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 and I want to emphasize very positive. But it's a long work. It's a very long work too. And I want to also emphasize long work. There's not going to be any magic to it. And we must keep to the rules of the game. If we're cutting it along the line, we might slide back to where we're coming from. There has to be a lot of fiscal discipline. There has to be a lot of commitment on the part of everybody. So this is why I'm saying to you that instead of treating the social component of these interventions as just one thing that is tied to a ministry, I think it should be sector-wide. Every sector should be able to have some social component that's addressing a need. But that has to be done with appropriate data. If we don't have this proper data, trust me, we're going to just be having little pins gnawing at the bag, and then from the little seeds that might be dropping, we'll just be making progress, but it's going to be slower than we envisage it to be. So data is central, data is key.
Dr. Emeka Okengwu, Project Development and Management Expert, thank you so very much for joining the program this afternoon. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Tolu.
All right, thank you so much. Well, that's it on this segment of the show. We'll now